in the meantime, while we are waiting people to join us, so thanks so much for joining us, especially for those that are joining. I see some names from Central America and Asia, where I know that it's either very early or very late this time. So thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us. We are still waiting for some more people. Uh, Okay, I think that maybe we can start just with some logistics notes. Before I start, I will introduce myself. My name is Luciana Berkovic. I'm part of the Grassroots Justice Network team, and I had the honor and privilege to co-edit this book today with Adrian Di Giovanni. This book that we are introducing today is about legal empowerment strategies in informal settlement across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Uh, so some notes so we all can participate in this conversation. The first one is that we have a simultaneous interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. So if you would like to hear this conversation in any of those languages, you can click in the globe in icon that is at the bottom, and you can select your language of choice, so English, Spanish, or French. You have here the notes in Spanish and French on how to do it. So take your time and select your language, and you will hear the full conversation in any language. If you would like to hear the original audios, just not select the language, and you will hear the original audio. Um, the second note is that the session is being recorded, and we will share the full recording afterward. And the third one is just to, in terms of time, the conversation we expect to be about 90 minutes, including time for discussion and questions. So please feel free also during the conversation to write your questions and comment in the chat box. The idea is that in the last part of the conversation, we will have space for questions and comments. But if you would like to write in the chat while the conversation is happening, please feel free to do it, and we will collect the questions and comments and bring them back to the discussion. So I think with that, we are ready to start, and I would like to invite Adrian to take the floor and do our introductions.
Hi, welcome everyone. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Bienvenidos a todos y todas. Welcome to this webinar. We're calling it Informal Settlements, Communities' Fights for Rights and Dignity. As Luciana mentioned, my name is Adrian Di Giovanni. I'm the team leader for Democratic Inclusive Governance at the International Development Research Centre Canada, that's IDRC. I'm speaking today from Ottawa, which is on the unceded, unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. IDRC, if you don't know us, we're part of Canada's foreign affairs and development efforts. And we really start with a basic belief that the people closest to the big problems in society are often the ones who best know how to solve them. Our topic today and the stories you're going to hear, I think, really exemplify that approach. So I won't say too much more. You've met Luciana, who also I've had the great privilege to work with as a longtime co-editor, collaborator, and a co-host today. We're going to guide you through our discussion. The purpose of today's discussion is really just to celebrate. And we want to celebrate in two ways. The first is we got the book done. We're all very proud. Here's physical copy. We have some extra ones. If you're really interested, reach out afterwards. It's free online for everyone around the world with a good internet connection through open access. And so, we're here to celebrate because we got the book done. I can remember sitting in this very spot in 2021, the height of lockdown. We'd gotten the green light to go ahead, and then we thought, okay, can we really do this? How are we going to do it? Because at that point, we had a clear vision and dream, but the path to make it happen wasn't quite so clear. So we got it done. And many of the authors are here today and people who helped make it happen. I saw some really nice familiar names come up as people were joining. And so it's really a first chance to gather and share and raise a collective cup. And so congratulations to everyone. And it's the idea is that we in the book that we now want to share and bring to life. But it's also a celebration in a deeper sense. From my perspective, and I'm not speaking objectively, completely subjectively here, the experiences captured in the book are some of the most powerful and inspiring examples of promoting human rights and justice that I've had, the privilege and honor to be exposed to in my work, and really just examples of how to take economic and social rights like the right to housing and make them real, and how law and rights can be used as tools to help overcome poverty and exclusion, how they can be used as tools for development and promoting equality in a deep sense. And really, what you're going to hear about on the topic of legal empowerment and informal settlements today, the way we start the discussion in the book, but we really frame it out, and we'll use it to start our discussion today. It comes from a quote from Leilani Farha, you're going to hear from later, one of our commentators, that, there's two ways to see an informal settlement. One, the more often way is in terms of stigma. The physical conditions in the settlements, whether it's poor sanitation, whether it's kind of improvised housing, or really the economic poverty that people live in. That's on one side, but on the other side, they're really stories of human dignity and resilience, of people's strengths, and they're really hopes and dreams for a better future. But again, the pathway for making those dreams, those visions come through of respect for people's rights, of dignity in terms of their physical environment. That's also often very uncertain and fraught. And so today, the celebration in a deeper sense is really to celebrate the examples, the stories, the successes, the community's fight for rights and dignity. And it's a story of the power of collective action and of strength and hard work and struggle and determination against all odds. So we're going to celebrate that today in our role in trying to share those stories through this one work. And it's really just it's a period where it's just so hard to watch the news. It's really a period of hard news, and so many of the values many of us have supported and fought for a long time have been under attack. So no better time and no shortage of moments to share and celebrate what we hope are some stories of, again, hope and inspiration. So that's the celebration. A bit about the book. I have one slide. Can we switch to the next slide, please? This project came together. The book, it started in 2018 with a bit of a seed of an idea. At IDRC, we were supporting a few projects in Latin America, in Africa, on these, what we call grassroots justice, legal empowerment, using rights strategies to work with informal settlement communities and understand how that was helping in their fights to build better, stronger communities, especially in the built environment. And so we brought together researchers from 3 Latin American countries, 3 African countries, and we sat together basically in a room for 2-3 days. And we asked just a series of common questions. What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? What's your experiences? What's your approaches? And really what emerged was a rich set of lessons across some pretty different and very deeply contextual sets of experiences. But there were some really strong threads that connected them all. And so we wrote it up in a nice brief, and then a blog, and then an article. But our vision, our dream was really to put together a larger volume, which we thought was missing, written by the groups directly supporting communities. And these are the types of insights that often don't get written down because people are so busy literally trying to put out fires or being at the front line and helping work alongside communities, either to prevent evictions or engage for a better future with a whole series of public officials. And also when these stories or these lessons get written down, often it's by other people. So that was the dream. We went from a workshop. Here's another picture of many of the authors of this volume from 2023. And so we did a lot of Zoom sessions, a lot of emails. And so along the way, we definitely made it happen. We realized we had no photos from 2018. So if anyone has any of those in the audience, please share for the next time around. And so what emerged, next slide, please. I forgot there's 2 slides. What emerged is really what we think is it's a beautiful collection, a powerful collection of 10 case studies. It's across 3 countries, 10 countries, and what really reflects decades of experiences. And so we've regrouped the chapter roughly into 3 main areas of focus. The first is in terms of litigation and how different community groups have been using the courts alongside a larger set of advocacy strategy to overcome some of the larger roadblocks, again, in going from the pathway of where large portions of cities might be on the outside looking in terms of access to services, in terms of good social economic conditions in their communities. So often going to court to try to get past some of the big first or last roadblocks. There's strong stories of using rights to ensure communities have a better seat at the table. That's participation, especially around decisions that involve the future of their own settlements or neighborhoods. And so often communities are on the outside looking in when really at the base they're advocating, pushing for just a seat at the table to be heard, to share their perspectives, and hopefully to shape a vision for their community with government, with a larger set of actors. And finally, there's a series of chapters on what we call the holistic approaches. Really across all the chapters, you see what's called a holistic approach, which means it's combining a mix of technical, political advocacy, legal empowerment, approaches, whether that's community organizations. Sometimes it's spilling peacefully into the streets for popular protest. There's a lot of technical and participatory planning exercises. There's different types of direct policy engagement with government, whether at a municipal level, a national level, a state, provincial level, and then, as we mentioned, sometimes going to court. And what you see over time is it's a mix and a change of approaches, and the chapters and the authors and the organizations and the communities involved very strategic in which tools they're using at times, sometimes in parallel, sometimes sequencing. And so the authors you're going to hear about today from Delhi and Nairobi and Buenos Aires, those are examples of organizations that have supported communities over many years and have really started from a situation of quite what you call precarity, very insecure situations, maybe 10, 20 years ago, and have gone to the full spectrum to larger scale, often full development, redevelopment of communities. And so you'll see really the full mix of interventions. That's about all I've said. There's an introductory chapter that Luciana and I tried to tie together so many of ththese lessons, hopefully to give a large, what you call bird's eye view, and then also a chapter, and you'll hear from Marino in a second, on women's leadership and gender equality in informal settlements, some real powerful stories of leadership. And I think very much our participants and speakers are testament to that today. So anything else you'd like to add, please, Luciana? And then I'll get back onto script. So please. And thank you everyone for joining. It's wonderful to see so many people here today.
Well, thank you, Adrian. So I was hearing you say, this is happening, this is real. Thanks so much. And I just to add that this was possible for Adrian dedication and effort. So a special thanks for you, Adrian, that you were pushing us and helping that this happen, and this book it's real. And not only I would say that this morning when I was thinking about this conversation, I was thinking that when I held this book in my hands, I was immediately taken back to I would say 4 or 5 years of discussions and exchange and mutual learning that made it possible. And beyond the content that you will find in this book, what stay with me are the relationship of trust that were built across borders, languages, and contexts among the author and ourselves. So this is something that happened like 4 or 5 years of working together and thinking together about this book. And for this, I would say that this is not just a book, it's a book, but it's not only a book, because the greatest values of this book is that It offers honest and profound reflections on practice. It does not only showcase successes and good practices, but also highlights the challenges, missteps, and some of the unresolved questions that organizations working on legal empowerment enforcement settlement has in the different regions. On a personal note, this project also helped me to reflect on my own experience. This is something that I wrote in an internal note in Namati, but when I started to work on legal empowerment, whatever it calls in this moment in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, I had not those spaces. So we were thinking that I was thinking on my personal tragedy and how this book helped me to think about the work that we've been working on legal empowerment. I would say that when we started, there were like two guiding ideas that we had when we started to think about this book and the whole process. That the first is that there are unique features of how the law and legal strategies take shapes in informal settlement. So throughout the chapters, you will find reflections on the ambiguous role of the institution, the tension between legality, illegality, and informality, the need of collective responses and community organizing for long-term periods, how the different strategies, as Adrian mentioned, combine and work together in an holistic and approach based on community-led strategies. And the second one is that despite the difference in context, we also see remarkable similarities across the cases. When Adrian showed the picture about this meeting that we had in Nairobi, I remember a moment where the colleagues from Saligan, I don't know if Saligan from the Philippines is here now, they were talking about the case about a riverside community facing reallocation for environmental grounds and the role of judiciary and institution. And as they spoke, our colleagues from ASIG in Argentina looked each other and so this is exactly the same that the case we are working on in Argentina, the Mendoza case, and it was exactly the same, so not exactly, but very similar in a similar moment. And then they started to learn each other, to work together, to identify commonalities and the strategies they were developing in the cases. So yeah, I hope that today's conversation take us back to those honest spaces of collective reflection, where we can think together about how to face common challenges. And as Adrian mentioned, this feels especially important in this current global political context, where many of the strategies and tools that we have may not longer seem adequate or sufficient to meet the scale of the challenges and power imbalances that we are facing today. So I hope that in the conversation we expect not only to talk about the book and what's happened in the past, but the challenges that we are facing now in our work in informal settlements, working with legal strategies. I would say that with that, let's hear from the protagonists of this book, that are the authors and the chapters.
Thanks, everyone. Apologies for the interruption. Shame on you, whoever did that, and think that some images like that, if it was disturbing, we apologize, but let's move on collectively. I think, again, it'll take more to stand in our way today. And that's not an invitation for more action. It's an invitation for a dignified and civil discussion. We don't need images to shock people. The power of our words and ideas. So I just did want to take a moment to acknowledge, to apologize, and let's move on. So next slide, please. So we have authors today from 3 of the chapters, as mentioned. We're not going to do full introductions just in the interest of time, although some of their bios will appear in the chat. And so we have from 3 chapters, the one in Delhi with representatives from a group called Nasdeek. We have Akanksha Badkur, who's a lawyer at the Supreme Court of India, Jayshree Sapute, who's the director and co-founder of Nasdeek. They're from the Delhi chapter, and it's called Ambedkar Camp, if I'm getting it right. We have Jane Weru, longtime collaborator and inspiration from Akiba Mashinani Trust in Nairobi, who's been talking. They've been working a lot in Mukuru, among other places, which is the largest informal settlement in Nairobi in Kenya. And then Catalina Marina, coordinator of the Right to the City program at ASIS, which is the Asociación Civil por Igualdad y Justicia. And has been supporting the work of ASIF, which has they have a chapter on Buenos Aires in Via 31, which is again one of these stories of going really from evictions to redevelopment. And as mentioned, she wrote a chapter on gender equality also. So we get 2-for-1 on this. We can go to the panelists then, please. And we're going to go community by community first, the authors to introduce their chapter. In just a few minutes, talk about what's the context, who are the communities they work with, and what are the main what's the main focus or questions in their chapter, and then we'll go to a bit more of a talk show discussion. So how about we go from east to west, and let's start with Akanksha and Jayshree, please, to the Delhi chapter. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Akanksha Bhatkar. Jayshree and I work with an organization called Nazdeek, a legal empowerment organization based in India. And we're going to basically talk about the upgradation process of Ambedkar Camp, Jhuggi Jhopri, or quote unquote slum cluster based in Delhi, and what the process of the legal empowerment journey has been like. Just to provide a quick context of Delhi itself, it's the capital of India. It has a population of over 30 million people, and it faces a severe affordable housing crisis. So more than 30% of the urban poor and the population of the city live in informal settlements, which lack not just secure tenure, but also adequate, safe, and basic services. Additionally, evictions are also very rampant in the city, and even eligible families under policies who are found to be entitled to housing spaces or housing stock are denied rehabilitation for long periods of time. So, in that context, how do we look at legal empowerment and how do we look at affordable, adequate, and safe housing for Jhuggi Jhopri or slum clusters in Delhi? Ambedkar Camp, the community in question for the chapter itself, is a small, triangle of land in South Delhi, which has just over 100 households, mostly who are migrants from neighboring states. And the houses themselves are made traditionally of temporary materials and lack sufficient space, ventilation, as well as durable construction. Additionally, there is a lack of basic services like water, water supply, toilets, sewage systems, and are severely inadequate for most residents. Mostly marginalized Dalit communities live in the settlement, who are also informal workers, and in addition to housing insecurity, they also face labor insecurity. They face additional policy challenges. The legal empowerment model of Nazdeek especially focuses on long-term interventions. So Nazdeek has been working in Ambedkar Camp since 2016, almost 9 years. And the model includes both trainings on legal frameworks, rights awareness, evidence gathering, advocacy skills, as well as facilitating and teaching soft skill. And the idea is also a transformation of the understanding of what rights are and how to realize them. Regarding the upgradation process itself, which was focused on bringing about incremental changes to the housing stock as opposed in order to avoid very disruptive evictions and rehabilitations. And it was assisted by technical experts who use tools to carry out a 3D digital mapping exercise. And as a result of community-wide consultations, were able to bring about additional changes. And again, the focus of this exercise was in situ incremental upgradation of their housing stock, which allowed residents to also participate in the process. I'll leave it to Jayshree to speak about the rest. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Akanksha.
you, Akanksha. Thank you for giving that background. Just want to add a few more things to the context is at the time when we had done this scoping for the upgradation, the party in power in Delhi was Aam Aadmi Party, and in the central government was the BJP led by PM Narendra Modi. So these are two different parties, and Delhi being the capital, there is a kind of a interplay of both the governments, and things could come to standstill. We have seen our Akanksha and I have been part of cases which wherein people have been waiting for over a decade for rehabilitation, even after being found eligible for a rehabilitation. So and as Akanksha had mentioned that over past couple of years, the evictions have been rampant with no due process, be it provision of notice or surveys or rehabilitation or any meaningful engagement. So as an organization, as human rights professionals, we were thinking like, how, what could be the solution? And to our mind, in situ upgradation was the best option, because in rehabilitation, the communities were pushed to the fringes with very bad quality housing, no infrastructure connection, and mostly the communities who would be rehabilitated would lose their livelihood. So livelihood was becoming a very big issue, along with the basic socioeconomic infrastructure connection. So with that perspective, the paralegals who we had trained over 9 years took the lead. They were the decision makers. We brought the idea that and connection that, these are the designers who we could engage in upgradation. The women themselves sat the designers down, took an interview of sorts, and then they engaged with the designers. They were the one who gave inputs to how they would want their community to be upgraded. They assisted when the designers were there to map out the community and do the GIS mapping. Once the mapping was done, they were the one who presented the entire plan before the state government, which was Aam Aadmi Party at the time. They also did interagency advocacy and coordination. For example, for construction of sewage, there's a different department which is in charge, while the building up of the roads, or who is going to repair the toilet facility. So there are different departments, different agencies which are responsible, and this web can and at times get really complex. So they are the one who did all that coordination and advocacy. So they are the one who took the lead, but community also took the ownership. Once the work started, they monitored the work. Few of the community members who had expert in construction work also supervised it, and they would call us and give updates. So the work which was community women led and community owned became sustainable, because the community had then started constructing their own houses. The upgradation improved the infrastructure within the settlement, and thereby improved the quality of life of people. And the likelihood of demolition, which doesn't go away at any time, but the percentage has declined because of the investment which has come from the government itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay Shri and Akanksha. And so now, I mean, you begin to feel the complexity of governmental structures, of all the issues to try to handle at once, and also the power of the paralegals, and in your case, the Women Network of Paralegals in Delhi. So that's a great introduction. You've queued us up. We're going to go now to Kenya, to Nairobi. Jane, please, we'd love to hear same questions. Tell us a bit about the communities you've been working with, what it's like over in Mukuru, and some of the main focus of your chapter. Wonderful to see you, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. Our paper is situated in an informal settlement called Mukuru in Nairobi. Nairobi is the capital city of Kenya. It has about 4.5 million people, and about 50% of residents of this city live in informal settlements. Just like Delhi, they do not have secure tenure and are faced with evictions. So in the year 2017, we got to meet up with residents from Mukuru who are faced with eviction. They came to our office and they asked us to support them to purchase the land they were sitting on, or otherwise they would be evicted. So we thought we could do it, but we then realized that there were more and more people or communities. In this huge community, Mukuru is really big. It has about 100,000 households sitting on 600 acres of land. So we realized there was a big systemic problem that we needed to understand. And so we were lucky, we got a grant from IDRC, and the purpose of the grant was for us to better understand the problems in Mukuru. And the first thing we did was to do research on land. And we discovered that Mukuru sits on private land, like I said, 600 acres of private land that had appreciated over time, and that the landowners now wanted to get back their land so that they could either sell it or make use of it, and they therefore wanted to evict the communities. So, working with an organization called Katiba Institute, we went to court. The communities mobilized and we went to court. We were able to get orders, injunction orders, to stop the evictions. So that worked for us up to that point. But we also realized that the living conditions in Mukuru were terrible, really, really bad, and that just having an injunction was not good enough. Something needed to be done. So with the research, with the funding that we got from IDRC, we put a coalition together comprised of civil society organizations, universities, and the community. And we started conducting research about the living conditions in Mukuru and the relationship between those who govern Mukuru and the state. What did we discover? We discovered that Mukuru services the reasons behind the very terrible living conditions in Mukuru. The first thing is that we discovered through community mapping, because we mapped every single structure, every single toilet, every single tap. We discovered that Mukuru had only 3,800 pit latrines, serving about 300,000 people. So these pit latrines will get full, they'll be emptied manually, and the raw human waste would be dumped into the river. And the services were terrible. We also discovered that water, the state did not provide water in Mukuru, and that these services were provided by informal service providers who charged up to 172% more for water than the rest of the city paid. And so we immediately, with communities, decided to share this information with the city. And when we shared this information, the city asked us, so what do we do? And we proposed that they declare Mukuru as a special planning area, because we realized that with the densities, it would be, there were no roads. There were no food. It's such a dense area. It would be impossible to even lay.
Sorry for interruption, Shane. Can you speak a little bit louder? The interpreters are telling us that so the sound is not working well. So if you can speak a little bit louder. Sorry for interruption.
Sorry. The settlement is so dense, it was almost impossible. It would have been impossible to even lay a pipe for bringing water into the settlement. So the first thing that really everybody agreed that the first thing that needed to be done was to plan the settlement. But the city had never planned such a big informal settlement. They didn't know what to do. And so when we discussed with the city, they said, why don't we form consortia, different consortia groupings of civil society organizations and the state that can work with the residents to help them plan. And that's what exactly we did. And the water and sanitation, because this chapter is on the provision of water and sanitation services, conducted consultations with the people of Mukuru, and they clearly indicated that they wanted toilets that were connected to the sewer at the plot level. And so in time, the state came in after the planning was complete, and they invested money into the settlement. They opened up roads, they laid water and sanitation infrastructure, and the people of Mukuru began to connect the plot or the courtyard level toilets to the sewer. So today, this is going on. And at this moment, we are almost working also with the University of Manchester, looking at preparing a policy on how the water company can provide water to all, to water and sanitation services to all informal settlements in the city. Because previously, they did not, their policy was not to provide water and sanitation services to informal settlements on private land. So this is where we have reached with this research. And basically the research really is to show really how research, community organizing and coalition formation can bring systemic change in the area of water and sanitation provision in informal settlements. I'm sorry if you didn't hear me very well. I'm sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jane. We heard well, and I think for the interpreters, they wanted to hear extra well. So thank you so much. And again, we see the rich stories in terms of a longer term trajectory, and also trying to get at many elements at once. So let's keep moving along to now Buenos Aires, to Argentina, and Catalina Marino, and to reflect. It's multiple communities. The one chapter is on, I think it's on a few, but especially on Villa 31, if I'm not mistaken, Villa 31. So please, over to you, Cata.
Thank you, Adrian. So just a quick introduction about the chapter. So I will talk about today about Barrio Mujica, Villa 31. It was formerly known as Villa 31. And this is a community where ASIG has been involved for the past 20 years, I think. And this, as you said in the introduction, I analyzed the Villa 31 case in my chapter about gender, but also is analyzed by my colleague Pablo Vitali in his. So you can see in depth the case of this urban slum in his chapter 2. So a bit of context, the picture that we are seeing now, Villa 31 is one of the largest and most populated informal settlements in Buenos Aires. They live around like 50,000 people there. And as you can see, it is located, well, maybe you cannot see, but it's located next to the main city port terminal. And also next to major train and bus stations, but also just steps away from some of the wealthiest neighborhood in Buenos Aires. So it's really centrally located, but historically marginalized. And just because of this location, the community has always lived under the threat of eviction, and they have been even evicted during the authoritarian rule and the military dictatorship. So a bit of context about this neighborhood. The houses in the Villa 31, they are affected by lack of infrastructure, lighting, ventilation problems, and also with informal connections to water and sewage and electricity systems, because they are installed by their residents. And also they were challenged with access to public transportation, ambulance services, fire trucks. So there are a lot of rights that are being challenged for people living in Villa 31. So what the chapter, what we try to understand in the chapter, and we follow the claims that the community has been implemented over the years. And so we can see how legal empowerment strategies have evolved over time, starting from some reactive strategies focused on resisting eviction threats to some proactive ones, demanding basic infrastructure and eventually broader social urban integration projects, right? But on the side of that, there was a core demand of ensuring residents' representation in decision-making processes. And so I think that's really relevant here for the discussion today. So I'll leave it there and we can talk about it later.
Thanks so much. So we have a sense of, say, where all the actions taking place. And now we just like to open up for a bit more of a discussion. And just to hear from you, and we can start maybe with Jane in Nairobi. What are one of the top two lessons? It's an unfair question, but if you had to think of what are maybe the one or two big lessons that you had in supporting communities' rights strategies, legal empowerment over time? If you had one thing to walk away with today, what would that be?
I think it's the very special role that evidence plays in changing things and in changing conversations. So the fact that we were able to show that the people in Mukuru actually paid for services because the city thought that poor people don't pay for services. But through the research that we did with the support of IDRC, we were able to show that poor people not only pay for services, but they pay way more than the rest of the city. So the city did not have any good reason for not providing services. They wouldn't lose anything. In fact, they would really ensure that everybody was served properly. I think the second thing is just the power of framing an issue in a manner that speaks to the public interests. So in Mukuru, we were able to show that not providing in water and sanitation services was a risk to the whole city. It was not just a problem for the people of Mukuru, but it was a problem actually not only for the city, but for the country. Because at that moment in time, Kenya had just gotten the right to fly directly to New York. Our airlines, Kenya KQ, to fly directly from Nairobi to New York. And we told the authorities that if we continue to have cholera, and Mukuru is just next to the airport, we are going to export cholera to New York, and we will never be able to live that down. So how you frame an issue, I think, is also critical to how the state is able to take it or leave it.
Thank you. Wonderful. That I hadn't heard that story. So wonderful to hear it. And definitely, I think we're grappling with how to frame issues these days to ensure people really understand at a larger level. So I could listen to your insights all day, Jane. How about we jump to Jayshree, Akanksha, a couple of big lessons that you'd like to share, please.
I can go first, Akanksha, or okay. So for us, I have also done like litigation wherein without using legal empowerment methodology, just assisting communities in litigating. And what I found that the community was not as invested in the process as after sustained engagement through legal empowerment methodologies. So here in Ambedkar camp, we saw more ownership of the community. We didn't have to, or it was a community who pushed us rather than us pushing community. Once, if we are taking break from going to the community or focusing on different work, they would call us and give us updates on how the work has progressed or not progressed and ask accountability from us. That was very refreshing. That was something which made us feel that even if when we step back from Ambedkar camp, the infrastructure building or the work which has been done, it will be sustainable and it will amplify to neighboring communities, because the politician who helped us in the upgradation of Ambedkar camp also then came ahead and said that if we would assist them in replicating the same model in other communities in his constituency. So for me, sustainability and community ownership is very critical. And like Jane has said, in Ambedkar camp, there's a big hospital which is right next to the community, and there is a constant threat that the hospital would take over the land to expand or build just the parking maybe, so that fear of acquisition of land by other entity is was very persistent. And I think with more formalizing, I think they're better placed to assert their rights. Akanksha, if you want to add something.
No, completely agree, Jayshree. Just to add that one of the biggest lessons was that you don't need to wait for a legal framework which facilitates this kind of change. And there are other ways of community empowerment and advocacy through which this change can be brought about while you're waiting for the normative framework to also develop.
Wonderful. And I think those are findings that have echoed across regions and issues where we've supported research and various advocacy on legal empowerment. Kata, anything to add in thinking about Buenos Aires, but also thinking about the gender equality chapter that you put together, which looks over a few of the chapters and experiences?
Well, I think that at least I was thinking about the Buenos Aires case, but maybe what stands out is that these legal empowerment strategies is a really long-term process, and the strategies at least in the Villa 31 case were deeply internalized and appropriated by the community. And what is interesting is that the strategies shifted depending on the context and the opportunities of influence. So we cover like 20 years of this case, and so the actions changed. Like they moved from strategic litigation to guarantee right to clean and drinking and safe water. And then they moved to a public, like a demand for an urban integration process, like a comprehensive urban integration process as a public policy. That legal mobilization also sparked or deepened the community organization. So a community space, the Board of Urbanization was created, and so that led to another strategy that was more of a lobbying strategy, like trying to advocacy tactics focused on mobilizing the local legislature, and so the community moved and passed a law, like a local law, that allowed the organization and integration of the Villa 31. And that law eventually it was sanctioned, but it was not enforced, and so that was a gap. There was a gap between the sanction of the law and then the enforcement of the law, and that finished in a third stage where eventually the local government decided to move forward with a comprehensive urban integration project. And the challenge there was how to monitor and try to enforce that public policy with the demands of the community. So I think that the challenge is that it's easier maybe to focus on the recognition of rights, like the first legal mobilizations were trying to recognize that people living in slums had rights, but then it's really hard to try to influence public policy. And I think that, legal empowerment and legal and political mobilization tools need to adapt in the context. So, and I think all the cases, but you need to focus on when are you working in the context and on the community. And I think that's the main lesson I can have from, at least from the Buenos Aires case. I have another comments about gender, but I think that we can leave that to the next questions.
Okay, thanks so much. And we're going to have one more question for the group, and then we'll turn to our commentators, and then we'll have more discussion. I mean, just on that last point, you mentioned it's hard to go from, you can get the recognition and then go from recognition to policy, and implementation is a whole other step. I mean, as I started by saying at the beginning, you turn on the news. I'm old fashioned. I turn on the radio, and it seems like human rights are taking a beating right now. The space for democracy, we talk about democratic backsliding. We talk about closing civic space. Just seeing human rights as framing it up in the way people believe it seems very much harder these days than it was even the few short years ago when we started. Some of our reflections, in our conclusion, Luciana and I reflect on that. We'd love to hear from you. What changes are you seeing? Is it getting harder? Is it the same? Or even just what kind of reflections or insights you might have, given that it's becoming harder just for even at the recognition stage across so many issues and contexts. So I don't know where to start. Maybe Jane will go to you first, and then we can again follow the similar order as last time.
Yes, I think, yes, it is getting harder. I think we've seen the brutality of the state on people. I mean, it's a very brutal state. And when the state is very brutal, there's not much space for negotiation or for talk. So we have seen a real shrinking of space due to brutality, due to abductions, due to, you name it, the tapping of homes. It's very bad.
Any insights? What do we do? I mean, the story of Mukuru 20 years ago, from what I understand, it was started for the story of brutality, and you're able to shift. Any insights? Because I think we're all grappling with the similar questions. And if not, we can save for another discussion another day.
I think I think for us, to a large extent, we leave the politics to the community. We kind of divide what we do up between the technical and the political. So at the technical level, I think we professionals deal with other professionals within the state and try to create space and negotiate. At the political level, we encourage communities to engage their elected leaders, because after all, they're the ones who elected them. And so through these two ways of discussion and dealing, we try to maneuver and to move forward. And a lot of the political means actually protests, sometimes negotiations. So that's the way we try to handle this situation.
Wonderful. A very eloquent answer to a somewhat difficult half-formed question. So maybe now let's get back to Delhi, to Jayshree, Akanksha. Any reflections on the current moment? Any important changes? Could be good. It's not all doom and gloom. Any guidance?
Similar challenges what Jane has experienced. Again, we got for a couple of years got stuck between the fight of two governments, the state government and the central government. Now there is the BJP is also in power in the state, but we have still not seen any positive development or movement. Even that deadlock is no longer there. The space for civil society to campaign, to protest is completely gone. It is the community who is taking the lead, and many times when they go and use language of the law, language of the rights, the first question they get asked, who taught you this? How do you know about it? Tell us the names. So it's just always this, constant threat of what would the community say, and the communities have become really smart. There's like, why we can't know about this? What do you think about us, kind of so the always the questions, the investigation is, how do you know about your rights? Who are the one who are informing you about your rights? And there was always less funding on housing rights work, but now even that pool has even more shrunken with the added scrutiny from the government. So to even when the community would take over the work, but it needs like building grounds for a couple of years before the community could community take up advocacy, community take up its own filing petitions and complaints. But for groundwork, there needs resources, and the resources are very difficult to find these days.
Thank you. Maybe just we'll go to Catalina, please, and Akanksha, if you want to add anything at the end, that would be wonderful, please.
So I think to connect with the previous reflection is that like the backlash in human rights discourses, or in this new context, exemplifies how legal empowerment strategies need to adapt to the context. I think that we need to keep that in mind in order to be creative in this new context. But I want to make another point that this the book proves that the legal empowerment strategies are worth it, and they are a really good strategy to protect legal rights with different marginalized groups, and that also proves it right for women. So I wanted to make that point. The point is that the backlash in human rights discourses also is that it's backlash in gender equality discourses in general, and that's a main threat, because that's it is crucial. Like what I analyze in my chapter is that it is crucial to embed the gender perspective in legal empowerment strategies for that to be really effective. If not, then maybe we can move to a great we can move forward with gender equality, but it's not so effective from the start. You need to take into account your the people that you're working with. And so the strategies that we implement need to not necessarily translate into greater women leadership or decision-making power. That's only possible if we understand, if we plan the strategy from the start, or at least it's more effective that way. Anyway, I wanted to say that it's really important to still focus on what we want to promote, even if the context is not so bright as we before we had it, right? So that's my reflection.
Thank you. Continued focus and resolve. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for everyone. We could spend a long time talking and reflecting, but we want to turn it now to our outside commentators, call it that, and to hear some additional perspectives who weren't directly involved in the book. And so maybe we can pull up the slide, or if that's too hard, it's okay. We have two people. We really, what we set out to do in this larger book is to merge two perspectives. On the one hand was the kind of legal empowerment, human rights perspective in terms of a kind of a way that Luciana and I, at least, and many of the authors, quite familiar with, but then linking it to questions of participatory urban planning, larger planning. I would say we're more experts on the one side, less on the other. And what we did for our commentary is to get two people we very much admire and look up to, and whose work and perspectives very much flow through many of the analyses. And we put out the challenge, let us know what you think. And so that's who we have today. And we put it, what do you like? What don't you like? What did we miss? What did we get wrong? We're open to all feedback and commentary. And so why don't we start with Leilani Farha, please, who's the director of the SHIFT. It's a global advocacy group on housing rights and human rights. And she was the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing. Again, we'll put full bios in the chat. So over to you, Leilani. Tell us what you think, please. And thank you very much for joining today.
Thanks, Adrian. And thanks for inviting me in to this really important conversation. Most of what I've learned about informal settlements throughout my career has been from many of the people right here on this webinar. So I am indebted to all of you for helping me learn and understand a really important dimension of the human right to housing. I'm sorry if my thoughts are a little scattered this morning. My eyes, my heart, and my soul have been focused on Gaza and Gaza City these past days. And I'll be honest to say it's really hard. I'm choking back the tears. It's hard for me to think clearly. I'm filled with deep sorrow for the fundamental human rights violations that have been allowed, what have been supported by many of our governments, including my own government, albeit not in my name. So for 2 years now, and I'm sorry, my comments are going to be pretty zoomed out. I'm in a really reflective mode because of what's happened in the last 2 years. I've been thinking a lot about the world we've created, a world that governments, corporations, financial firms, and broader society have created, where they get to decide who counts and who doesn't. And I've been thinking about the role of human rights in the creation of that world and in the dismantling of that world. And I think today's conversation is helping us to understand the role that rights can play in dismantling a world that determines some people don't count. Of course, I've known way before October 7, 2023, I've known about this world of who counts and who doesn't for some time. You cannot work on human rights in the area of housing. You cannot visit informal settlements all across the world. You cannot meet with people living in homelessness and other states of insecurity without knowing what kind of world has been created. Some people count and some people don't. And we know that informality is created by the imposition of a particular system of laws, private markets, planning and resource allocation. We've heard all about that already this morning or today. And that system neglects and violates the fundamental rights of the very people who've been excluded from that system. And informality is this beautiful response to exclusionary formal systems. And their defense through legal empowerment is a direct, in my opinion, challenge to this system of exclusion. And so today we feel this hope and this energy from this webinar because this is a direct response to exclusion. What you all have done and what you've recorded in this book is just so incredibly powerful in this geopolitical moment. Adrian mentioned what I said at the beginning of my report, which was written years ago. It remains my experience, and it remains my experience, especially today as I listen to all of you. And I'm just going to reiterate it because not that I think I'm so brilliant, but I think that these words really are holding me right now. And what I said was that from a human rights perspective, informal settlements have that dual nature. On the one hand, they are systemic human rights violations. They are the effects of state action and inaction and policies that deprive millions of people of their fundamental human rights. A quarter of all people on the planet are living in informal settlements. Things like what we've heard, displacement and evictions, denying not just basic services. You know, we talk about water as a basic service, denying what is fundamental for human existence. Amazing. On the other hand, informal settlements are this incredible accomplishment. That's what I said, a profound expression of individuals, families, and communities claiming their place and their right to housing. And that's what you have brought to us today in the webinar and in the book. That celebration, even though it's through toil and hard work and, you know, knocking heads against walls, an incredible accomplishment. I guess what I want to say is, I'm short on time here, is that it's not just encouraging what you all have done with your work. It is, in fact, in my opinion, what's necessary if we're going to reverse who counts and who doesn't. your actions, your activities are, to me, the right side up way of the world. We are in upside down world right now, and you're offering us the right side up, or the human rights side up. I also just want to comment that one of the aspects of the human right to housing and human rights that doesn't get talked about enough is the fundamental right to participation and inclusion. Participation in democracies or in public spaces. And that's what you have brought to the fore through your work, and that I've learned so much from you, that even when you don't count and when you're out on the margins, you have to insist on participation and inclusion. And that's one of the biggest struggles. And I've heard that through your comments today. And the last thing I'll say, and I know I've gone on too long, is that the world is in a global housing crisis. There's no doubt about it. And like at a really practical and, bottom line, it won't be solved unless the rights of people living in informal settlements are recognized. The right to remain, the right to in situ upgrading if that's what the communities want. How else will we solve the housing crisis? We can't build new. It will kill the planet. There isn't land. It's expensive. People living in informal settlements can't access those build so-called opportunities. The only way forward is to regularize informal settlements where that's what the communities want. And the last thing I'll say is, please, all of us, let us make connections between the work that we're doing at the local level, the marginalized communities with whom we work, and the people in Gaza and in the Congo and in any other place experiencing oppression. And let us make our governments know that we won't stand for it, that we believe in human rights, and that everyone is part of the human family and therefore has rights that attach to them, not as a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Leilani, for just coming at how you are right now and sharing your perspectives. And I think the one reflection that there is we're struggling with the large structural challenges, and often challenges that play out in very localized, specific ways. So thank you for bringing us there and sharing. Over you to Diana. Love to hear your perspective, please. And then we'll open up for larger discussion with the time remaining. So please.
So thank you, Adrian. Can everyone hear me? Is that good? Okay, perfect. And Lania, you spoke beautifully about the current moment. I'm hard to follow, no? But anyway, fortunately for me, Luciana and Adrian suggested a structure that I'm going to follow for my comments. I think I wanted just to begin by saying thank you for the opportunity to engage with this discussion and this book. I really appreciated that. It's an amazing book. It's a book that contains very rich case studies, careful, nuanced, contextual analysis, grounded reflections on what works in our search for justice. And it is really much more than just studies about legal empowerment. So many congratulations to all the chapter authors and the editors. I know how much hard work it is, and you've really pulled it off. So many congratulations. I don't want to spend too much time on the question you raised about why it's an important topic. Leilani has said a lot about that already, and I would find it hard to follow that. But I do want to move on to some of the other questions. I want to move on firstly to why it's valuable and why they're important lessons. So one of the comments that's made in the introduction is that legal empowerment is a relatively new and flexible concept. I don't want to disagree with that, but there has been a long discussion, in my experience, among urban social movements and support organizations about the merits of an approach based on rights. And I'll go on to speak a little bit about why that is, because I think the book illustrates some of the challenges. But I do think that one of the lessons from this book is it talks a lot about the integration of rights, legal and litigation-based approaches with other things. And I think that, to me, is one of the reasons why it's valuable. That is a really, really important contribution. I think the second way is that it's a very honest book. It really, not only do the pages represent the blood, sweat, and tears of writing, but the narratives represent the difficult challenges of being progressive, being transformational in an urban space. So there is discussions about when laws, litigation worked. There are discussions about when they led to violence, particularly in the South African chapter, but it also comes out elsewhere. There are discussions about when it led to increased vulnerabilities because it drew people into a market that excludes on the basis of income. So, for example, people might get water, but they might not be able to afford water. So there's a whole new level. So for me, it's an extraordinarily valuable contribution because of the depth of experience and the honesty that is represented in the written word. And finally, it's an important contribution because it is rich in its contextual analysis and it has a lot of diversity. So it's possible to understand, okay, so this was a really helpful way forward because the Constitution offered this in this particular case. And so it's really rich in its learning opportunities. Thinking about what it means to me, I would suggest a few things. So moving on to the next question about what we may have got wrong or overstated, drawing on the Adrian and Luciana's your challenge to us. I'm not sure I would agree that necessarily the book argues that legal empowerment should be used more frequently. Honestly, I'm not sure it leads there for me. What it leads for me is that it should be considered more frequently. Because I think for me, the book really draws out that there's a very difficult challenge between different dimensions of action. What can be litigated? What needs more political mobilization? What needs groups to be super organized and threatening because of the level of organization in order to open up the possibility? What needs new development options? And Jane Ware in her presentation spoke a little bit about work that I'm involved in Mukuru. We're trying to support AMT, but they're developing new options for how tenants can achieve sanitation. Once those options are developed, then political pressure and laws can move forward. But without that, I'm less confident. So for me, it opens up the potential, but not necessarily that is the first step. So reflections on what next relate to that point. I have two really important, well, for me, they're important reflections. Important because I think they really do bear on how people can be more strategic and more effective because they're more strategic. So the first is how to balance the different kinds of interventions, how to balance using existing laws, litigations with efforts at mobilization, organization, and building a political commitment about co-producing new options for things that are not easily binary choices. Do you have water? Do you not have water? And also, I think sometimes as people choose invisibility, and they should be allowed to choose invisibility. So how do we balance these options? How do we make them work together better? And who makes those choices? I think that's also in the pages of this book. There was a little bit of comment earlier on about the accountability of professionals vis-a-vis community organizations. Lawyers are super powerful individuals. How do communities hold the lawyers that support them to account and are not dominated by that differentiation in social status? So that seems to me a really important set of conversations that are introduced in these chapters, but not necessarily concluded. The second related aspect, but I think it's different, is once there is a commitment to going down a legal empowerment litigation route, what increases the likelihood that it is successful? What are the things that make it land properly, land effectively, don't increase vulnerabilities? And one of the things that we're working with our colleagues in the African Cities Research Consortium is really understanding how coalitions that cross over different agencies with different social status and network, how they can be successful in moving forward urban transformation. So the book has an amazing set of experiences, insights, challenges. There is so much here, but I don't think the work is finished. I think they are still important questions about which we have much to learn. But thank you.
Wonderful, Diana. So much to think on. Apologies to everyone. And Diana, I think we were so enwrapped with your comments from the beginning. We'll put your bio up, but Diana's professor at the University of Manchester, and as she mentioned, among many other things, leading a large consortium, the African Cities Research Consortium. And so apologies for blanking on that, but much to consider. And as you mentioned, I think we actually agree with you, and we'll go through the volume and put consider using instead of more. And but I particularly appreciate the point about invisibility, and so that it's not on community's shoulders necessarily to be out there in front and saying we need help. This shouldn't be this way. Great. We have some time. It's about 10 minutes for questions. I am seeing one hand. And so Eva Alvarez, why don't we try that? We're going to give trust that people will intervene in a respectful manner and in a brief manner too. So please, if you have a first question, if others want to put questions in the chat also, we can leave that to panelists also to answer after we hear from Eva. So why don't we collect some questions, please? So please, I see you're the first, Eva Alvarez de Andres. And then we'll go from there.
¿No? ¿Puedo? I can?
Sí.
Vale. I prefer in Spanish. I think there are translations.
Puedes hablar en español, por favor.
Perfecto. Castellano. Porque...
Yes, I rather speak in Spanish.
Muy rápido,
very briefly.
Bueno, mi nombre es Eva Álvarez, soy urbanista.
I'm an urbanist. I'm Eva. I've been working a lot in this, and a great battle that I have is being able to transform discourses and ideas. In that sense, I've been trying to question the concept of informality. From the academy, for example, we legitimate the processes that there's just a production of the spaces, that they may be co-producing spaces with other agents, but the idea is to be able to, that I know that this is a concept that we commonly use, but I think that in my articles, I always put them in question because somehow we also legitimate the production of spaces. The fact I wanted to share this and to ask whether we can talk about this.
Abbas, team, we see your hands up, please. So, again.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you. I am here from Sudan to greet all of you. And we are in Africa. This is a main problem in our communities. As said Jenny in Nairobi, we are in Khartoum or other cities, even the formal settlement is destroyed. So we have many challenges to face this issue. I am a lawyer and a director of Miller Center for Transitional Justice. Now working in the NGOs in dealing with legal aid and legal consultation in with the IDPs and refugees in northern Sudan. I am asking outcomes of the book, two areas. What's the gap you find from the book? Is it the gap of laws or policies or sources like financials or like this? Why informal settlements is very huge gap in our world? This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Abbas. And before that, Eva, why don't we open it up? We have a question about, how informality is defined and conceptualized, and also then Abbas's question now more of what's driving all these challenges in the first place. Anyone want to reflect? We'll leave it open. There's also some nice comments coming in on the chat that I'll leave people to.
I can give it a day. For example, in Delhi, there is policy, there are policies, but they are not inclusive. There's a cutoff date. So if you are in the city prior to 2014, 2007, there are different cutoff dates. If you can show the identification, which there are about list of 10 IDs which you need to present to the government, and if you can show that, then only you can become eligible for rehabilitation. But what happens is communities usually do not have this documentation, or they will have some kind of documentation. They will have a birth certificate of their firstborn. They might have a registered post which has come to their address. They might have like, some identification which is issued, and that identification is no longer kind of valid. For example, one of our community, they had passbooks which were 10 years 10 years, like, they needed to show that they were there at the location in 1999. They had a passbook which was from 1989, but the account was no longer operational, so that document was not accepted as a proof of residence. So the policy is not inclusive. And the second challenge is wherever whoever is covered by the policy, for them the policy is not implemented. So in spite of people being found eligible, in spite of they found their name in survey, they furnished all the documentation, but still they are waiting for 10 years, 12 years for government just to move and allot them a house. Once the houses are allotted, they're allotted outside the purview of the city. So what happens many a times, the communities don't find the livelihood. So many of them would either put those apartments on rent or sell them off and come back to the streets or other settlements. So there are various challenges. These are top three which has come to my mind.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to comment and jump in? We have a few minutes left. What I can say there's a question about translations in the chat. Our intention in the beginning was to have translations for French and Spanish. We've run out of time. We also ran out a bit of funds. So it's something that's on our mind, and ojalá que vamos a poder, that we will be able to have something we definitely want to share, at least with some of the main languages in some of the regions where the book takes place. And on the question about informality, as Luciana put in the chat, I mean, we spent some time in the introductory chapter talking about what does informality even mean. And there's helpful framings, especially from Professor Mitlin and her collaborators, to see informality in terms of power dynamics and often power imbalances. And so who gets to define the rules about decisions and who's at the table is the big contestation over informality oftentimes, and not just a kind of juridical or formal, are you in or are you out? And that's a notion that we found really helpful then to understand how it's the kind of imbalance of power and exclusion is an interesting element where legal empowerment, I think, very much from the beginning looks at to different levels of an intentionality and awareness. And so that's something definitely, I think the question very much resonated with our thinking. And I think it's just a larger point about the time, who's defining the rules, who's wielding power in what ways, as has come out from the discussion. Any other questions or comments? Luciana, maybe any reflections from the discussion, please?
Yes, well, thank you so much. There is a lot here, and I take the point of Diana that I also agree that this is just the beginning, and there are a lot of conversations going on and a lot of discussions to unpack. So many of the things that were said here is okay. There is a huge discussion in any of the points that we have here. And something that resonated to me that Leilani mentioned, and I also agree, we are in a difficult political moment globally, and we are in a moment that it's difficult to have hope in humanity, and it's difficult to think that our strategies has an impact. But that's something that this book provides to us, and for me, when I was reading, there are experience with more than 20 or even 30 years of experience working with the same communities. And in some cases were political, really difficult political context, organizations working under authoritarian regimes. So organizations working in where there were not legal frameworks they can take to do their work. So what I think is this book provides us some hopes that even in difficult moments there is something that we can do. And I think we are now in most of the places in a very difficult political moment. And it's a good moment to think about and to see the strategies that organizations were using in the past in difficult moments to see what works and what not. I also like the point that somebody mentioned is that, okay, legal empowerment is one of the strategies and we have to consider, but something that this book shows is the complexity of the strategies that we use and how we have to adapt in the different moments we are working on. And the connection that is impossible to work on legal strategy without thinking about how to build community power. Because in moments like now, where in some of the cases legal strategies are difficult or we cannot have impact with legal strategies, what remain and what can make the change is the kind of the power that the community is building together and how organizations are supporting those communities to build that power. So I think that we are coming to an end, but I take the point that this is the beginning. We would love to continue some conversation. We have some ideas on how to advance those discussions. And especially because we think that we are in a moment that those discussions are global. We can think some of those discussions at local level, but when we see the connections in this book of what is happening in different parts of the world, and how we can learn each other and how we can work together, we see that especially, I would say, in this global difficult moment, it's important to be together, to learn each other, and to share our strategy. So I would say that I take the point, and I think that we should continue having those collective spaces and discussions. So more to come in the near future. So this from my end, and thank you so much for being here and dedicate this 90 minutes to this discussion.
Wonderful. Thanks, Luciana, for bringing us home and tying it up. And so really, we're at time. Just a thank you to everyone, to the authors who are here, those who spoke, those who are online, to Leilani and Diana for your perspectives, which were rich and complementary really in their own right. And there's so many people who helped make this happen, both the book that we've spoken about, but even just this webinar. All a shout out to Daniela in particular from the Global Justice Network team. She really made it all come together. And there was Louisa on our side also at IDRC. Large teams of people. This happens again. It's the power of collective action. Let's take the celebration. Hopefully there were some words of inspiration and insight. We look forward hopefully to connecting with many of you in different ways in the coming months and weeks and years. Take care, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Amazing.